You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Mission Log Engage on the Roddenberry Entertainment Channel. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion, and it's us. We're your Mission Log hosts. And you know what happens? You send us letters. Well, you send us email. We can still call them letters, right?
And comments, too.
Comments, questions, pointed criticism, thoughts to ponder, all of the above. You send those to us based on what we talk about on the show. And then we get to come back here every now and then and riff on those off the cuff.
Yep. So we have a really wonderful letter from Jason. And John, would you like to start off our conversation, please?
They're all wonderful. But
they
yes,
are all
but
wonderful.
Yes,
but Jason's is first in the wonderful list of Monday through Friday.
Go. Jason, you get to be wonderful first. There you go. Jason says, like usual, I enjoyed your discussion on resistance, but I had a different read on the character Caylem. I didn't see him as delusional, but as someone struggling with dementia. Now, I get that for people dealing with that issue, delusional ideation is often a synonym. In cases like that, sufferers may be so confused and forgetful that their delusions are often the only way that they can make sense out of anything. They have basically lost their ability to understand what a fact even is. Often the experts recommend that you go along with the person's delusion until they forget, as attempting to contradict them will only make them more anxious and agitated, even if it is painful to the patient's loved ones to essentially be forgotten. So I thought that resistance was a very interesting way to explore the dynamic of an adult-child caretaker relationship by essentially thrusting Janeway into the middle of it. It was also interesting to see how natural the acting of being compassionate came to her, even though she had no familial obligation to Caylem. I noticed that you didn't seem to think Caylem was a case of dementia. Why not? And don't you think that treating him as a person with dementia affects your interpretation or not? Provocative. Interesting. Thank you, Jason. Thoughts, Norman?
Well, what I like about what Jason's framing here is why we do engage, because we don't see every single possible dimension or dynamic to an episode. You know, John, you see what you see, I see what I see. Sometimes, and maybe more often than not, we come to an agreement as we disseminate the show. Then I really like that, if you look at what Jason's saying here, that's just another way of interpreting Caylem in this episode. Maybe if I had one more viewing of Resistance, maybe I would have come to the same conclusion. Watching Joel Grey's performance, though, in the way that I did, I felt that he was straddling that line very well, where I think he understood that he was on this, tipping towards maybe losing some of his faculties and focus, but at the same time, though, knowing that this life that I'm living is better with Janeway in it as my daughter, who isn't my daughter, than not at all, because I've lost so much. So I think that when we were looking at it, we were looking at Caylem from being so broken that his reality, even as fantastical as it was better than the reality of not having any hope in his life. Yeah. But yes, when you take a look at this as a study in case of dementia and caregiving, in Janeway's case being his caregiver, of course it would affect the way that you interpret this, because now it becomes a projected loved one, and what you would do to be able to respect and preserve that one's dignity, Caylem's dignity at the end, which is what she did. And I don't think that's a case of being a caregiver. I think it's being a case of being compassionate.
Yep.
And that is a human, and specifically, I think, framed in this way at the end of the episode, a Starfleet way of being and doing the right thing at the right time.
Yeah. And Jason, I think I might have, in our discussion, played a little fast and loose with the terms, referring to Caylem being delusional. And if we wanted to be very specific, if you're interpreting Caylem as having dementia, that could be a diagnosis. The idea of seeing Janeway as his daughter, that is a delusion, whether he is suffering from dementia or not. So we could kind of go down this semantic rabbit hole and pick apart those words. I think where I was trying to land it is just say, like, this is a thing that is not true in his life, but he is behaving as if it is true. So that is a delusion. And Janeway most importantly, behaves with compassion and care toward this character that she knows nothing about other than the pieces of his life that she has put together. I saw his story, and I think what's so cool is that you can pick this apart in a lot of different ways, but I saw his story as someone who was traumatized by what happened and has repressed these memories about his daughter and about his wife. So could you see this as as dementia brought on by age or brought on by trauma or whatever? Absolutely. I saw it as a coping mechanism that he has developed over time, and he has lost himself in this fantasy of what's going on to deal with the guilt over what he didn't do at the time. End of the day, though, I think 100%, whether we classify him as having dementia or simply repressing memories, or I say simply like it's the thing, in either case, I think what's important and what I would still take away is that Janeway behaved the right way and she behaved with compassion, and that's sort of the beauty of their relationship.
That's what I love about being able to take a point, from our podcast that we never even really got to explore and have this kind of like short conversation. Because I do think that at times, some of our listeners like Jason, they'll be like, what about this? Or what about that? And that's what we do here on Engage. So if you've enjoyed what we've discussed here today, please like, share, and subscribe to Mission Log Engage here on YouTube at youtube.com/roddenberryprod. And make sure to check out us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/missionlog if you would like to support us there. And there are several tiers that you could choose to support us and join our Discord server, which is where we have our fantastic Mission Log community that's growing every day. Send us your comments at missionlog@roddenberry.com. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Mission Log Pod. And remember, we may engage with your comments on the air.